Welcome everybody. Welcome to the ColegauCymru ALN project webinar. Thank you all for coming. Karen and I are really getting to look forward to these webinars. It's just such a great chance to connect with colleagues from all over Wales and find out what you're doing, sharing best practice and jointly working on some of the challenges that we're facing for all those who work with learners with additional needs. I just wish we'd done it years ago when I was still in post at NPTC. It would have been so good. We're delighted to be broadcasting this webinar from ColegauCymru today, and we're on the Ammanford campus with Caroline O'Hara. It's the third in the series that we're running as part of the government-funded project supporting learners with complex needs. And in today's webinar, we're going to be looking specifically at supporting learners with autism in further education. Before we do that, though, I'd like you to meet Caroline, who'll take you on a quick guided tour of the Discrete provision and facilities in Ammanford. Right, I understand you can't hear me. Is it too loud, too soft, or what? Right, can you all hear me? Shall I shout a little bit louder? Let's just have a look. Maybe it's my mic not fixed properly. Need to just check that. Louder, please, it says. Can I turn something up? One. Oops. Yeah, okay. ColegauCymru can hear me. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Anne.
Yeah, okay. Volume's okay. You can hear, can you, Newtown? And Aberystwyth is fine. So who is it that can't hear at the moment? Who are we? That's okay. That's good. I think we'll go ahead with it because I think the majority can. Those who can't, maybe put your hand up and we'll get Karen to try and sort you out with something, maybe. Right, Caroline, thank you so much for hosting today's webinar at Ammanford. I came and visited Caroline last week to have a look round and a guided tour of the campus and met with some of the learners and staff. So can you tell me a little bit more about that? I know there's been a lot of change and growth in the numbers of learners coming onto the Discrete provision at ColegauCymru. So what have been the major changes and how have you responded to these, Caroline?
Okay, hello everybody. Here in the entry department at Ammanford, as part of ColegauCymru, we've had numbers increasing year on year. And those numbers have increased more so for the learners with complex and additional needs, and also for some learners who have autism or are identified as being on the spectrum in some way, shape or form. Now, we've responded in ways that we've now got our own sensory room, we've got a specific wet room, and we've got the forest school up and running. And we have, sorry, I've gone off track. I do apologise. So we've got the sensory room, we've got the wet room. We've adapted the curriculum. So our curriculum is expanded for learners with complex and profound difficulties. We've got a specific course set up for them now, and also for learners who are going into the transition into mainstream. We've got an E3 level 1 programme there for them now. So our curriculum is expanding linear, but also across as well. Our support has changed quite a lot within the last couple of years. We are very lucky in our department, and we have our own learning support mentor called Alison Davis, and I'll go into more of her role a bit later on. We also have our own departmental educational support assistants whose own contracts have also been adapted over the last couple of years to meet the needs of the learners coming into our provision currently. So we are expanding and changing as much as we can in the environment that we currently have.
Yeah, and on the slide that's in front of you, you can see some of the pictures of the facilities and the things that Caroline's doing. Some fantastic things going on there. You can see the forest school activities there. They have a piece of woodland that they use, and a brilliant glass bottle. It's a lemonade bottle greenhouse. I know
Yeah.
you've got one of those in Newtown, haven't you, Erica and Amanda, that I've seen. So there's another one similar for you to look at, and of course the sensory things. Right, thank you. You've also got some really successful learners, and I know that the next slide shows Ellis, who's there. Yes, I came to see his, waiting for Karen to move the slide on. Saw his amazing artwork. He's fantastic at art. And I know that he's also given you some feedback on his learner journey here. So perhaps if you could talk us through a little bit of Ellis, who has autism and is doing art at the moment.
Yeah. Well, what we did with Alice is we asked Alice the same and very similar questions to the learners that attended the ALN conference recently. So we would give the feedback and then we could compare the support and the experiences of learners, obviously, who have autism. So the first question that we asked of Alice is that we asked him to talk about the courses that he's currently on and what he was hoping to achieve. So Ellis is actually, as you can see, he's studying art. He's on one of our vocational programs where they can choose 2 different pathways. So Ellis is doing art and design, and he's also doing hospitality and catering. And he really, really enjoys these because the practicalities and the production of something at the end. He's also studying maths and English, and he feels like he's okay with all those. Um, what he's distinctly stated was he's not really interested in the certificates at the end because it's more about the doing, which is fantastic, of his understanding of the process. It's more about the experience. So on the second one, it was, what is it like moving from school to college, and what helped to make that really successful? And we've worked quite a bit on the transitional phase for our learners from school to here to ColegauCymru, and lots of adaptations are being made, and I'll go into that a bit more detail later on. But what Alice's responses was that he was really nervous at first. He said the college environment was big, and it felt big to school, but he felt that he would be okay because he'd visited prior to coming full-time at college. He'd visited twice, so he'd had a tour around the college, he'd met the tutors, he'd met other students that were here. Then he'd returned back and then he'd had lunch. So he said he was feeling more and more at ease. By the time he'd started his full-time course, he felt really okay about being in the environment then. He really enjoys the shared support that he has in class because he doesn't feel like it's overpowering, and that he can learn at his own speed and independently if he needs to. But if he needs the support, he can ask for it. So he felt that was really, really good. So the third question was, what are your plans for the future when you leave college? Now, he was really unsure about this, Alice, because currently he's going through the process of, he's applied for level 1 art and design over in Pibbeloid, and he's been over for a visit. So we've started the transitional period for that. He's yet to have his interview. That is coming shortly, so there's a bit of anxiety around that. But he is thinking about moving on to the future. So that is a real positive, the links to have with not only outside organisations, but links within campuses within ColegauCymru is really, really important for our learners who are moving on into mainstream. So the final question was, what has been the best thing for you about the support that you get in college? Now, he was very, very succinct with this because he talked about the tutors at the college, and in particular Mr. Ian Smith, because he said he would go to him for information or help or assistance if needed be. So Ian would be his first port of call. Now, Ian is the coordinator for the courses that Ellis is attached to, but he's also Ellis's personal tutor, so it's good that he could recognise that. And then he also spoke about the support staff within his groups, other lecturers and Alison, which is fantastic that he appreciates that support network around him. So that was the finish for that.
A real successful story, and please thank Ellis for giving that response. It's really,
I will do.
I think it's so important to have the views of learners in every one of these webinars, so that we are actually working from what learners think as well, making it real learner-centred.
Most definitely.
If you've got any questions for Caroline, then please do type them in the chat pane as we go. So, if there's anything that any of you want to ask, please just type your questions into the chat pane. I know in Sergar, Ellis is one learner with autism, but you've seen a large number. It sounds as if you've seen a large number of increase in the number of learners with autism. Is that right, Caroline?
Yeah, there's been quite a steady increase of learners with autism, but what we're seeing more so is for learners that are displaying or experiencing traits of autism that are not necessarily diagnosed. So we have learners who have the diagnosis of autism or Asperger's, but we're seeing more traits within learners who have not got the diagnosis. So that gives us more emphasis to try and make the environment and the curriculum more friendly and more inclusive. So you still, you know, including those learners and they're not struggling along the way, and it's really apparent that there are students coming to the college, whether it be within the entry department or within mainstream, that are struggling as undiagnosed traits of autism and Asperger's.
Okay, I wonder if that's the same in all the colleges. On the next slide, we've got just a little poll for you, increasing the number of learners with autism at college. If you'd like to tick in the box whether you think that your learners, whether you've had an increase, by putting a tick in the relevant box. And if you've got any suggestions as to why you think there might be an increase, then write it in the chat pane. Yeah, lots of people coming up there already, seeing an increase across the whole college. One not so sure, but that's okay too. But mostly, yes, not just in the discrete provision, but across the whole college. So lots of more learners with high-level needs, perhaps, coming into the college. And it says, yes, where were we? More in mainstream.
Can I just respond to the question about training when there's progressing within the college environment? At ColegauCymru, we offer basic ISD training to the majority of staff and lecturers, and that's organised by Steve Kelshaw, who's our Learning Support Director. But what happens is if a particular learner is transitioning from entry into a mainstream provision, part of Alison's role is that she will ensure that those people that are going to be in contact with that young person have a full holistic view of their needs and their requirements and what's successful for them and what the trigger points are. So yeah, that is really, really important for us.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll be looking further at training and things a bit later in the webinar. But thank you very much, Caroline. The next slide, I've put a definition about what autism is. On the next slide. Just to clarify that, it's come from some really good resources that Ambitious About Autism have produced as part of their Finished at School project. I'm sure you've heard the phrase, the autistic spectrums. These are traits or ways that the brain processes information. People with autism all have a different set of traits in different areas of the spectrum. Some will create difficulties in everyday life, while others can be useful. The four main areas of difference I've put up there: communication and understanding. So you may have some learners who are highly articulate and some learners maybe who are non-verbal. Social understanding, about understanding social behavior and the feelings of others, and this can affect developing friendships and relationships. Interests and information sharing, this can lead to a strict adherence to routines and rules, and difficulties may be in planning and personal memory. Sensory processing, and you can have learners that are oversensitive or undersensitive, but the impact of that is it leads to extreme levels of stress and anxiety, particularly in unfamiliar or overstimulating environments. And anyone can be anywhere on that spectrum at all. The areas work together. So you might have somebody who's highly articulate, but might have difficulties with language in areas where there's a sensory overload, in loud and crowded spaces. I don't know whether that rings a bell with anybody there, if you've got any comments that you want to add to that. Before we move on to the next slide. or as we move on to the next slide. Now, the next question is, how many people do you think have autism in the UK or have traits of autism? If you'd like to, yeah, we've got 1 in 10, 1 in 100. Oh, lots of people who think 1 in 100. Popular choice. And you're absolutely right. According to the Ambitious About Autism Finished at School resources, the number of people that are thought to be affected by autism in the UK is 1 in 100. So moving on to the next slide, if the answer is 1 in 100, not always severe autism, what might that mean for your college? How many learners? What I'd like you to do, or just to think about yourself, is to think about roughly how many current enrolments you have at college of FE numbers and divide it by 100. And I think you'll find that the thought that you may have rather a lot of learners, particularly, have we got somebody from ColegauCymru? I think your numbers are 20,000. So that would make it almost 200, a possibility of 200 learners with autism at your college. Am I right? Nobody typing at the moment. Okay, it's just a thought. What we're going to do next is just show you a short clip from Ambitious About Autism, a clip called Busting the Myths, which I think is a really good clip for you.
Autistic people are antisocial.
People with autism are dangerous.
People with autism will never have a relationship.
Everyone with autism.
Everyone with autism is the same. The same.
The same.
No.
Autism is curable.
You can't cure how someone's brain is tuned.
To think that we cannot be sociable under any circumstances is just some sort of madness.
I'm not antisocial.
People with autism will never have a relationship.
Obviously that's not true, because I've been in a relationship myself.
Autistic people have no empathy.
If I hit my elbow or somebody knocks into me in the street, he'll give my arm a kiss.
People with autism.
People with autism.
People with autism won't succeed in life. I hate that myth, and I hate how people are shocked that I've actually gone to university.
Everybody can do something productive with their life.
They may have only met with 1 or 2 people on the autistic spectrum. If they don't understand the word spectrum again, and I would of course recommend that they turn to a dictionary.
Autism is just a different way of thinking. It's the personality that makes a person, isn't it?
I like that clip. I think that the important thing that comes from it is that idea that if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. And the need for people to be very person-centered and not think about one sort of provision that will fit all autistic learners or one sort of type of support that will fit all learners. I think that's the most important bit from that. Moving on to the next slide, both the ALN bill that's coming in, the new code of practice, and the ASD strategy for Wales highlight the importance of some of these things, particularly having the learner at the heart of the process. But also one of the things that they talk quite in depth about in both is about having the transition planned in advance. Now Caroline's talked to you a little bit already about transition and the importance, and we heard from Ellis saying how important his transition was. But just to go back to you, Caroline, thinking about that transition process, what do you do at ColegauCymru to make the transition to FE successful, particularly for those with autism?
Well, what we're trying to focus towards in ColegauCymru and the entry department in particular is for the transition period to be learner-led, so very person-centred. So historically, we would have taster days at the end of the year, and that wouldn't necessarily fit for all learners. It could be too condensed, or it could be too overcrowded, or a very various amount of things could occur. What we put in place now is that learners can visit Alison connects with the learners within their review process at school, and she gains relationships with them, and she achieves a lot of information from those reviews. And then the learners can either come into our School Link programme, or they then can start making appointments with Alison to come and either come for a tour around the college, come over lunchtime, come over break time, come over into a session for a couple of minutes or an hour. Or it's very learner-led. Some learners may come once or twice. Some learners may come 4 or 5 times throughout the year. And it is the responsibility of the schools to support those learners to come to college to enable their transition. This enables learners to make connections with students that will be here when they're on full time. It helps them to connect with the environment and become aware of the environment. It also helps them to see the support networks that are available, and that there is a connection between school and college. So that what we're trying to aim for is for that transition to become as transparent as possible, really.
Thank you. Yes, and I know you've done some sterling work, you and Steve, with Rob from the local authority, working on the multi-agency links. Are following the UPOS bid? Or UPOS work?
Yeah, we've done a lot of work through UPOS, trying to reaffirm our relationships with the local authority, and that is going in positive steps forward, to be honest, because more learners are able to stay within their own communities whilst we're taking on more learners with complex and profound difficulties. So that enables them to stay with their families and within the communities, but it also enables those learners with autism then to access community projects or curriculum within their own areas, or make friendship groups and become more independent within transport. Some learners with autism would never have got on a college bus and come, but working with the local authority and doing travel training and stuff like that in the past, learners with autism have been able them to get themselves to college and be independent in that way too. So yeah, it's a really rounded, holistic view that we're trying to work with the local authority.
Yeah, and looking out there's a lot of other good practice coming up in the chat pane. Thank you, Susan Shepherd, for your information about information packs that you send out, and Sharon, who says that they do similar things with transition meetings and schools and learners and parents. Shirley, thank you. Yes, learner-led, it's really, really important. And Leanne, Bridgend, yes, consulting with the learner, the family, school and careers, Wales, to make sure that everything's in process. Yes, lots of work going on there. And yes, CAVC, I was there yesterday. I love your new building. Thank you. But yeah, transition meetings, drop-in days, student handbooks. It's great. Loads and loads of suggestions there. Thank you all so much for sharing. That's what these webinars are about. Not just about us talking about it. It's more about facilitating so that you can share the practice between you. Students who come to college every week so that they can get used to the surroundings. Yeah, thank you, ColegauCymru. That's really good. I know that NPTC in Brecon also do a fantastic, an amazing theatre project with some of their learners. That's more for the learners in discrete provision, but any of these things really, really do help. Thank you. Moving on. I know some of you may have come to our conference the other week, and one of the stars of the conference was Joe Baldwin. He's head of learning support at Gloucestershire College, and after the ALN conference, I knew we were having this webinar, and I knew how good he was about talking about people with autism. And I invited him to come along to this to see if he could give us some information. He couldn't because he's on his way to Brussels at the moment. Hope you have a good time there, Joe. But he's very kindly made us a YouTube clip on sharing good practice of effective transition. We're going to share that in 2 parts. So the first bit, we'll share about effective transition and environment.
Hi, my name is Joe Baldwin and I'm Head of Learning Support at Gloucestershire College. I also have Strategic Lead for Special Educational Needs and Disabilities, or ALN in Wales, and also for High Needs Learners. I've been asked to talk to you for a few minutes around how we support learners with autism within a further education college. We've got a fantastic autism coordinator who works to support learners across the college and also work with schools across the county of Gloucestershire to support transition of learners with autism into our college. We support with enrolment by having a differentiated enrolment offer and enrolment day for those learners with autism and high anxiety and communication needs to enable them to come into college during a quieter period of time in enrolment and experience still the same opportunities and still the same experience but in a more controlled and calm environment. We've got a fantastic virtual tour that's available on our college website which shows the campuses and our college environment and enables learners and parents to explore our campuses and our key facilities such as the library, the canteen, the social spaces, but in their own time, in their own comfort, using their own computer or iPad. This gives students an opportunity to explore the campus and understand what college life is like before they've even walked through the door into the college. We've got some fantastic quiet spaces available to students with autism and sensory difficulties on every one of our campuses. These spaces include some sensory areas and also some social spaces where students can engage with each other if they want to. They can use computers, they can sit quietly, they can make themselves a cup of tea or have lunch together. But it offers them a quieter space away from the main college areas just to enjoy perhaps being calm, being alone or being with a small group of friends where they feel safe and secure.
Thank you, Joe. I've just been reminded that we've only got 15 minutes left, so we're going to have to move on a little bit. Joe's great, though, and thank you very much for sending us that. Looking next, looking at resources in the environment, and I wonder if any one of you would like to put into the chat pane about how you've adapted your college environment. Joe was talking about how they'd done theirs with quiet spaces and things. The pictures that you've got in front of you are from Finished at School resources from Ambitious About Autism. They have a really good audit tool that you can use to find out how good you are at things. And one of the bits is about the learning environment that's adapted to take into account specific needs of young people with autism. So what about yours? Quiet spaces from Claire? Yeah, that's great. Anybody else? I know Bridgend have their rather nice quiet room, which is lovely. And others, what else have we got? If you want to chip in at all, Caroline, with anything that you've got there.
Well, we've got some quiet areas within the library, but here on the Amherstford campus, the library is quite small in comparison to others. We have the sensory room, but for some learners with autism, that would not be appropriate, but for some it would be fantastic. You know, as again, it's learner-led, isn't it? It's what's comfortable for the learner.
Yeah, thank you. And lots of people there saying they have quiet zones as places for people to be. Yeah, okay. Just looking at the next one then, I am moving on quickly now because I know that we're fairly short of time. Looking at effective strategies, curriculum and resources, anything that any of you found? Now I've just put a few up there while you're all typing in the chat pane. One of them is the National Autistic Society. The picture there is from their website. They have a fantastic website with lots and lots of useful things on there, including there's some video clips of learners who are going into sport. There's a really useful tool for learners that about managing their money. They do all sorts of training, and I know that some people have used their training, but a really good website, and they also send you out a newsletter every month or so. ASD Info Wales, they have the strategy for Wales for autism. And again, they have a site full of really good information, including an ASD planner that learners can use. Has anybody used any of those sorts of things? There's a few people typing. Keep typing your things in. I like the idea of meetings with mentors and counsellors and CAVC's hub with a quieter environment. Lots of people typing in useful things there. To a coach, a learning coach. ASD Planner is great. Right, you've used it, have you, Sian, there? I know we've used it. We used it in Powys for a while, and some of the learners found it really, really useful. So NPTC are using the ASD Planner. Okay. Keep typing. We'll move on to the next slide, but keep up with your resources as well, because as we go on, we'll just gather these together. So the next thought is, what about training? And I know that a lot of you out there are doing a lot of autism awareness for all your staff. At the bottom there, you can see my certificate that I got from an online course that I did using the ASD info site. And I think there are some colleges where everybody's gone through that. Very simple information and then quizzes afterwards. Have your staff done anything like that, Caroline?
At the moment, but we will be looking to do that now.
Yeah. Some people I know are training in partnership with their local authorities. I think NPTC Powys are doing that. Is that right, Erica and Amanda? I think Hazel's on some training, isn't she, with the local authority in with autism and various other things. The learning support qualification from the LSA qualification that Agorid run, the award, the certificate. I don't know whether has anybody using those. And perhaps some in-depth training. And then conferences and visits. Now, I know you can talk about that, Caroline, because I know your staff are actually going on some conferences, aren't they?
Yeah, well, there are a couple of conferences going on pretty soon, really. There's one in Manchester at the beginning of July, and there's one in London just after. And I'm sure that you said earlier on, Anne, did you say something's going on in Cardiff tomorrow?
Yes, I think there's one from the National Autistic Society about sensory overload and autism, from what I remember. But it's on their site, so do have a look. Yeah, that's great. And if any visits, talking of that, has anyone been to visit Gloucestershire College or any of the other colleges? I know Joe's always very willing to have people to come and have a look and see what they're doing. But then there are other colleges as well, so do. Yes, ALN qualification level 2 and level 3. Yes, I'll be looking forward to being with you there for that, Amanda. And lots of ASD training with Kirsty Jones. Yes, so great. Okay, what we're going to do next, because we've not got very long, is to play the rest of Joe's clip. He's given us the rest of that, just for his tips and.
We've also delivered some really, really good college-wide training and awareness. So we support the World Autism Awareness Day, and we do a whole range of things across that week to support learners and to raise awareness of different needs, celebrating difference. We also work with staff across the college, particularly where we know that there are vocational areas that support higher levels of students with sensory difficulties and with autism and Asperger's. And we'll work with them to really help them to understand how they can best support those learners, the small adjustments and amendments they can make to the curriculum, and how they can better support and plan for the different needs of the learners that they've got within their classroom, but particularly those learners with higher sort of autism needs and sensory difficulties. All of our learning and support assistants across the college have gone through the Autism Education Trust Tier 1 or Tier 2 training to make sure that they're at a level of awareness where they can support those learners and they can understand what those needs are and the strategies that they can implement to support those learners with autism. We've also brought a range of resources to support learners just to manage their anxieties, and some of these can include really, really inexpensive resources like fiddle toys. We've got Lego in the social spaces, and we've also just implemented some sort of other really quite inexpensive resources such as weighted blankets, little apps for iPhones and for iPads to support with learners managing their time, managing their timetable, and making sure that they're in the right place at the right time. All of our students with autism are tracked within our centralised tracking system, which is on our sort of central intranet, which all staff have access to. So staff are able to see exactly what the needs of those learners are, they're able to easily identify strategies to support with them in class, and they're also able to add to a chronology any key messages or any key pieces of information that are pertinent to that learner to make sure that they're well supported. That also helps with the consistency of learning support assistants, knowing exactly what the needs are of those learners and how best to support them.
Thank you, Joe. And there's his top tips for supporting transition of young people with autism. We're almost coming to the end. There's some fantastic things going on in the chat pane, which Karen's going to send out to you a bit later. But yeah, those tips there from Joe. What next? We've got regional meetings coming up. Oh, Moodle e-learning first. There's still the person-centered reviews Moodle e-learning module there. If anyone wants to access that, then please email Karen or myself. We've had the first of the regional meetings from the ALN FE project down in CRBC yesterday. It was a very, very successful meeting. The other two for the Southwest and the North are coming up very, very shortly next week. We're at ColegauCymru again in Ammanford for the meeting on the 21st of June, and also at GLLM on the 24th of June. Those meetings are meetings between staff and the local authorities, looking at the code of practice and some of the difficulties and some of the challenges that we're facing, and getting people working together. We had one very successful conference on the 20th of May. Our next conference will be on the 20th of October, where we'll be actually showcasing your practice from the projects that you're doing as part of this ALN project, from the money that's come from the Welsh Government. Our next webinar is on the 26th of August. That's after the holidays, so it'll give you a nice first time back before the students come in. And the webinar is going to be about supporting learners with mental health needs in further education. The link for the evaluation forms is both in the chat pane and also on that slide. We really do appreciate your feedback, so please do send us some information about what you think of the webinars and how we can improve them. And if you're listening to this as a recorded webinar, then please also do the same. We still want to hear from you. So Karen has put the link for that within the chat pane. And I think that's more or less all from me. If there's any particular topics that you'd like us to cover, or that if your college would like to host one of the webinars, then please do let us know. I'll just say a quick thank you to Caroline and to Karen, and goodbye from me, and then I'll hand over to Karen, who's just going to finish off. Thank you all, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Just to confirm, if you weren't following the chat pane, there's been so much interaction today. Thank you ever so much for joining in, for all the really good ideas. I'm going to email out the transcript this afternoon, so if you didn't have time to jot down or take screenshots, you'll have all of the transcript, and I noticed that people have put links in. Just to remind you that there is a link for our feedback form. Please fill that in. But can I just ask you for one last interaction, just to show your appreciation to Caroline and to Anne, if you can use your emoticon just to give them a round of applause or a smiley face. Thank you, Leslie. It's not easy doing your first webinar, and I know Caroline was quite nervous earlier, but I think she's done a fantastic job. Thank you again for joining us. We're looking forward to seeing you on our fourth webinar on the 26th of August. And just to remind you, we are looking for a host organisation. Please get in touch if you would be willing for Anne and I to broadcast the webinar from your college or organisation. Thank you. To sign out of the webinar now, you can just close your window. We'll leave it a few moments and then we'll shut down the room, and I'm going to turn the recording off now. Thank you ever so much for joining us. Goodbye.